Hey guys, it's Ellie. Welcome back to Bite-Sized Book of Mormon. I'm glad to have you with me. So if you've never been here before, this is just a podcast where I read through one chapter of the Book of Mormon each episode, and to give a little bit of context, a little bit of insight, a little bit of good times. So stick around. So if you remember last episode, we read Alma chapter 56, which is very famous and is kind of the debut of the Stripling Warrior Army. We heard about them a couple chapters ago, but we haven't really heard from them until Alma 56, in which they fight against the biggest army of the Lamanites. Keep in mind, this is an army of 2,000 young boys that have never been in war before, and they were able to turn the tide of a battle against, again, the largest army of the Lamanites. It's pretty dramatic, and also, not a single stripling warrior died. So, very miraculous, very cool. These kids are pretty brave. So, go back, listen to that chapter if you haven't already. But yeah, I think without further ado, let's move on to Alma chapter 57. And now it came to pass that I received an epistle from Ammoron the king, stating that if I would deliver up those prisoners of war whom we had taken, that he would deliver up the city of Antiparah unto us. But I sent an epistle unto the king that we were sure our forces were sufficient to take the city of Antiparah by force, and by delivering up the prisoners for that city, we should suppose ourselves unwise, and that we would only deliver up our prisoners on exchange. And Ammoron refused mine epistle, for he would not exchange prisoners. Therefore, we began to make preparations to go against the city of Antiparah. But the people of Antiparah did leave the city, and fled to their other cities, which they had possession of, to fortify them, and thus the city of Antiparah fell into our hands. What an anticlimactic way to start this chapter. If you remember, the army that the Stripling Warriors helped fight last chapter was the army that was possessing Antiparah, and so that was, the big scary army that was fighting them. And then, once they're all basically taken prisoner at the end of chapter 56, Ammoron is like, hey, Helaman, hear me out. What if you gave us all back of our prisoners? That would be pretty cool of you. And Helaman was like, we don't have to do prisoner exchange, because I can just take my prisoners back from you by force, so that's what we're gonna do. And then Ammoron is like, man, you suck. And then in verse 4, everyone in Antiparah leaves, runs away, and the Nephites just kind of get Antiparah by default. So in verse 3, they're like gearing up for a war. The Nephite armies are getting ready to do this big battle against this big fortified city, but then all the citizens that are in that city just kind of leave. And just kind of run away. So anyways, that's kind of an iconic opener to this chapter. And keep in mind, this is an extension of Helaman's epistle to Moroni. So this is still Helaman talking, and even though in Moroni's time it's about 30 BC, this epistle is talking about events that happened around 26. And so this is a little bit before, a little bit back in time for us, but it's just from a different perspective. So we haven't left Moroni. This is just a letter that Helaman is sending to Moroni. And thus ended the 28th year of the reign of the judges. And it came to pass that in the commencement of the 29th year, we received a supply of provisions, and also an addition to our army from the land of Zarahemla, and from the land round about, to the number of 6,000 men, besides 60 of the sons of the Ammonites who had come to join their brethren, and my little band of 2,000. And now behold, we were strong, yea, and we had also plenty of provisions brought unto us. And it came to pass that it was our desire to wage a battle with the army which was placed to protect the city Cumeni. And now behold, I will show unto you that we soon accomplished our desire, yea, with our strong force, or with a part of our strong force, we did surround by night the city Cumeni, a little before they were to receive a supply of provisions. And it came to pass that we did camp round about the city for many nights, but we did sleep on our swords, and keep guards, that the Lamanites could not come upon us by night and slay us, which they attempted many times. But as many times as they attempted this, their blood was spilt. At length their provisions did arrive, and they were about to enter the city by night, and we, instead of being Lamanites, were Nephites, therefore we did take them and their provisions. So now that Helaman's army and Antipas's army in the city of Judea are a little bit beefier than they were last chapter, now that they've gotten a little bit of provisions and armies from Zarahemla, now they're like, okay, now that we have Antiparah, which was just kind of handed to us on a silver platter, let's go for Cumeni. And so what do? They go, hey, we know that this city is supposed to get some supplies soon, and so we're gonna siege it, basically. We're gonna surround it, and we're going to stop those supplies from coming in. But we know that the Lamanites gonna try and kill us, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna stay awake, we're gonna keep guards, we're gonna sleep with our swords right next to us, so that we can always be prepared, just in case the Lamanites try and come out and kill us as we sleep, which is kind of what Teancum did for Malachiah. So, the Lamanites have a history of copying strategies that the Nephites did first, and so they might try and pull that, because the Nephites have already done it, so Who knows? Anyways, so what I like about this section is that the Nephites are never idle. After they win Antiparah, which is a big win because it had a really big army in it, they don't go, awesome, sick, great, let's, live here now, we're done. Helaman immediately goes, let's get Cumeni. Like, we're not done, we still need to clear our borders of the Lamanites. We still need to make our borders safer and more unified, just like they used to be before the Lamanites got all these cities. And so in doing so, not only are they not being idle by not just settling on getting one city, but they're not being idle by when they're surrounding that other city they're trying to get. They aren't just letting their guard down. They aren't surrounding the city and just kind of sitting there, They're having guards, they're sleeping with their swords, they're ready to go in case there was an attack, which there was multiple times. If they weren't so vigilant, they would have been dead. The Lamanites have a history of being a copycat for Nephite strategies that worked in the past. Just like Teancum killed Amalickiah, maybe the Lamanites were trying to come kill Helaman in his tent. Who knows? Anyways, so it's this kind of diligence and lack of idleness that I think is really interesting in this section. Also, I think that it is highly entertaining that in verse 10, when the Lamanite supply line finally does come, it says, and we, instead of being Lamanites, we're Nephites. It's like, oh no, you're Nephites! Oh man! I just think it's kind of funny wording. Anyways, moving on. And notwithstanding the Lamanites being cut off from their support after this manner, they were still determined to maintain the city. Therefore, it became expedient that we should take those provisions and send them to Judea and our prisoners to the land of Zarahemla. And it came to pass that not many days had passed away before the Lamanites began to lose all hopes of succor. Therefore, they yielded up the city into our hands, and thus we had accomplished our designs in obtaining the city Cumeni. But it came to pass that our prisoners were so numerous that, notwithstanding the enormity of our numbers, we were obliged to employ all our force to keep them or to put them to death. For behold, they would break out in great numbers, and would fight with stones and with clubs, or whatsoever thing they could get into their hands, insomuch that we did slay upwards of 2,000 of them, after they had surrendered themselves prisoners of war. Therefore it became expedient for us that we should put an end to their lives, or guard them, sword in hand, down to the land of Zarahemla, and also our provisions were not any more than sufficient for our own people, notwithstanding that which we had taken from the Lamanites. And now, in those critical circumstances, it became a very serious matter to determine concerning these prisoners of war. Nevertheless, we did resolve to send them down to the land of Zarahemla. Therefore, we selected a part of our men and gave them charge over our prisoners to go down to the land of Zarahemla. So this is an interesting issue that the Nephites haven't really dealt with before. They haven't had to, because they haven't been so successful before, and they haven't gotten this many prisoners at once before. So they both took Antiparah, which they kind of took that entire army prisoner in chapter 56, and also Cumeni, which I assume they also got loads of prisoners from that, because they specifically surrendered instead of running away like the citizens of Antiparah did. So they have a lot of people that are prisoners of war that they don't want to kill, but it sounds like logistically that's kind of one of the solutions on the board here. Because they have to use their entire army to guard just their prisoners, and they can't do anything else. So they're kind of stuck. They can't guard all of their prisoners and also do military things. And so they have to either kill some of their prisoners, which, they don't want to do, or send them to Zarahemla, where the people in Zarahemla can deal with them, which, it's a big capital city, so they obviously have a lot more resources than Helaman and a small army do. So, what do? They send a part of their army to take all of their prisoners to the land of Zarahemla, which, there's a problem in that sentence. I'm sure you might have noticed it. Because remember, earlier when I was talking about it, it said that they needed their entire force to guard the prisoners, and now they're only sending a part of their force to send these prisoners back to Zarahemla. And also, the previous verses that I read detailed the fact that these Lamanites are willing to fight with sticks and stones and whatever they can get their hands on to break out and escape. The Nephites have had to kill thousands of them in their efforts to escape. And so, these Lamanites are not only violent, but more numerous than the people guarding them by a long shot. So, I have a feeling that this prisoner trip to Zarahemla is not going to end super well. But it came to pass that on the morrow they did return, and now behold, we did not inquire of them concerning the prisoners, for behold, the Lamanites were upon us, and they returned in season to save us from falling into their hands. For behold, Amram had sent to their support a new supply of provisions, and also a numerous army of men. And it came to pass that those men whom we sent with the prisoners did arrive in season to check them, as they were about to overpower us. But behold, my little band of 2,060 fought most desperately, yea, they were firm before the Lamanites, and did administer death unto all those who opposed them. And as the remainder of our army were about to give way before the Lamanites, behold, those 2,060 were firm and undaunted. Yea, and they did obey and observe to perform every word of command with exactness, yea, and even according to their faith it was done unto them. And I did remember the words which they said unto me, that their mothers had taught them. And now behold, it was these my sons, and those men who had been selected to convey the prisoners, to whom we owe this great victory. For it was they who did beat the Lamanites, therefore they were driven back to the city of Manti. And we retained our city Cumeni, and were not all destroyed by the sword. Nevertheless, we had suffered great loss. Okay, so things have happened. So after they send the part of their army to go and give the prisoners to Zarahemla, it says in the next verse, on the morrow they returned. And the people in Judea just didn't ask about the prisoners. I highly doubt that Zarahemla is only a half a day journey away, because that would be there and back in one day. So I have a feeling that those prisoners did not stay prisoners for that long. Luckily, though, it sounds like they didn't kill all of the army that was conveying them, so, that's good. They were able to survive and come back. I just think it's kind of funny that this big chunk of this army that was sent on an errand the day before, that should take a lot longer than a day, they come back the next day, and they just kind of don't say anything, and they just kind of go, yep, we're back now. And no one asks why they're back so soon, and they just kind of accept it as fact. Because, actually, in that day where that part of the army was gone, they got attacked by the Lamanites. And it is only the fact that that part of the army got back so quickly that they were able to survive. And it was also the fact that the stripling warriors are freaking awesome. And in fact, in verse 22, it says very specifically, behold, it was these my sons, and those men who had been selected to convey the prisoners, to whom we owe this great victory. So Helaman is crediting this win against the Lamanites to the people that came back so quickly from their errand, and to the 2,000 stripling warriors. Because the army that was left there, besides the stripling warriors, was not cutting it. They needed the extra people to come back from their errand, and they needed the fierceness of the stripling warriors. And that is what won them the day. They were not going to win otherwise. So in a way, I guess it's kind of a tender mercy that that errand failed, and they presumably lost all their prisoners, because it allowed the rest of the Nephite army to live, because they were able to come back and turn the tide of the war. And so, I mean, I guess I shouldn't call it a tender mercy, because it's not like a small and simple thing. It's like, well, they actually saved like a lot of lives. It's a pretty major thing. Anyways, it's a tender mercy, but like whatever a bigger tender mercy is, right? Anyways, this is a very interesting order of events and miracles and coincidences that are causing the Nephites to win so much here. In the beginning of the chapter, people just left Antipara. In the middle of the chapter, they were able to siege Cumeni and take all of their prisoners. And then they sent an errand to send prisoners away, and while they were away, they got attacked, but luckily they lost all the prisoners and came back really quickly so they could help fight. They've gotten 3 wins so far. They've gotten 2 cities and 1 win against an attacking army. They're doing pretty good. And I can definitely see the hand of God in all of this. Not all of this had to happen the way that it did, but I believe that that comes from God. All these coincidences, all these miracles, all these happenstance, God is facilitating all of this. And it's because of their great faith, which I definitely see. So anyways, let's see how this continues on, shall we? And it came to pass that after the Lamanites had fled, I immediately gave orders that my men who had been wounded should be taken from among the dead, and caused that their wounds should be dressed. And it came to pass that there were 200 out of my 2,060 who had fainted because of the loss of blood. Nevertheless, according to the goodness of God, and to our great astonishment, and also the joy of our whole army, there was not one soul of them who did perish, yea, and neither was there one soul among them who had not received many wounds. And now their preservation was astonishing to our whole army, yea, that they should be spared, while there was 1,000 of our brethren who were slain. And we do justly ascribe it to the miraculous power of God, because of their exceeding faith in that which they had been taught to believe, that there was a just God, and whosoever did not doubt, that they should be preserved by his marvelous power. Now this was the faith of these of whom I have spoken. They are young, and their minds are firm, and they do put their trust in God continually. once again, none of the stripling warriors died. But the difference between last time in Alma 56 and this time is that before, none of them were even wounded, and in this chapter, all of them are wounded. Which I think is a beautiful allegory for how God's deliverance works. I've talked a lot about the Nephite idea of God's deliverance and how it's not really a gift handed to them on a silver platter. I've talked about this in previous chapters. It's very interesting. The Nephites kind of see God's deliverance as something that God helps them achieve on their own, as opposed to something that God just kind of gives them because of their faith, right? And so I think that it's really cool that in verses 26 and 27, it talks about how amazing and astonishing it was that nobody died when they were all horribly wounded. In fact, 200 of them fainted from the loss of blood. And yet no one is like, oh man, they shouldn't have been wounded. That was awful. Wow, that was really bad that they're all so wounded. Everyone got wounded. This is so bad. Instead of saying that, they say, what a miracle. And it's all a matter of perspective. This is why I sometimes say the miracles of God are in the eye of the beholder, because you can see things in the way that the Nephites see things, where everything is deliverance from God, and they ascribe everything to the power of their faith. And yet you could also very easily say, wow, how awful it is that these kids have to go to battle and that they're so gravely wounded. And I just love that these Nephites ascribe everything to God. And also, like I mentioned earlier, the allegory for what God's deliverance is like. God does not deliver us from all of our problems, but God does bring us salvation. God doesn't say, hey, now that you believe in me, now that you're baptized, now that you take the sacrament every week, you're fine. You will now float through life and have no problems. He doesn't say that. But what he does say is, if you're baptized in my name, and you continue faith and endure to the end, you will be saved. Just believe on his name. He makes no more promises to how easy our lives will be. He does say he will deliver us, but again, that has nothing to do, necessarily, with our temporal lives being spared. It's a miracle that God did decide to save all of these kids' lives, but their own parents had probably close friends and maybe even family members die at the hands of Lamanites, and yet they still taught their kids, if you do not doubt in the name of God, you will be spared. Or you will be delivered, rather, which I think is a very important choice of words. Because it doesn't mean you will live. It means you'll be saved. And I think that that's beautiful. And I think that when we expect that life is going to be easy once we have God in it, then we will be disappointed, because life continues on. Life is still difficult. Life is still chaotic and awful and full of difficulty, but it's also full of beauty. And even though these kids were wounded, and in fact 200 of them fainted from loss of blood, like they were severely wounded, they lived. And instead of decrying that God didn't deliver them from their wounds, they're praising God because he delivered them from death. And I think it's all a matter of perspective, and I really love the perspective that not only the Nephite army has, but also the stripling warriors specifically. They focus so much on not doubting God and being delivered. But I personally believe that had some of these stripling warriors died, they still would have felt delivered because they were saved. I don't think any of the anti-Nephite Lehis, the stripling warriors included, ever take salvation for granted, because they all, as a people, understood how screwed they were. They all understood how dirty their souls were from their previous sins, and they do not take God's atonement for granted. And so I believe that even if some of them did die, it would still be celebrated as a gift from God that they found him before their death. Oh my goodness, I just love this perspective. And I think it's so cool that these brave young men live. I think part of the reason that God specifically chose to temporarily save them, as opposed to just save them in the afterlife, which he does anyways, is because they're so powerful, they're so brave, they're so faithful, that they still have work to do on this earth. Maybe God wants them to raise kids of their own in the same way that they were raised. Maybe God wants them to be leaders in their own right. Maybe he just wants them to continue to inspire the Nephite people by their power and by their faith. But either way, their work is not done, and therefore they will continue it. And now it came to pass that after we had thus taken care of our wounded men, and had buried our dead, and also the dead of the Lamanites who were many, behold, we did inquire of Gid concerning the prisoners of whom they had started to go down to the land of Zarahemla with. Now Gid was the chief captain over the band who was appointed to guard them down to the land. And now these are the words which Gid said unto me, behold, we did start to go down to the land of Zarahemla with our prisoners, and it came to pass that we did meet the spies of our armies, who had been sent out to watch the camp of the Lamanites. And they cried unto us, saying, Behold, the armies of the Lamanites are marching towards the city of Cumeni, and behold, they will fall upon them, yea, and will destroy our people. And it came to pass that our prisoners did hear their cries, which caused them to take courage, and they did rise up in rebellion against us. And it came to pass that because of their rebellion, we did cause that our swords should come upon them. And it came to pass that they did, in a body, run upon our swords, in the which the greater number of them were slain, and the remainder of them broke through and fled from us. And behold, when they had fled and we could not overtake them, we took our march with speed towards the city Cumeni. And behold, we did arrive in time, that we might assist our brethren in preserving the city. And behold, we are again delivered out of the hands of our enemies, and blessed is the name of our God. For behold, it is he that has delivered us, yea, that has done this great thing for us. Now it came to pass that when I, Helaman, had heard these words of Gid, I was filled with exceeding joy because of the goodness of God in preserving us, that we might not all perish, yea, and I trust that the souls of them who have been slain have entered into the rest of their God. This is an interesting perspective, right? Because you remember I was talking earlier about the group of the army that was sent to convey those prisoners to Zarahemla, right? And they came back the next day and they just kind of didn't ask questions and they helped fight the army back and then they're just kind of fine. Turns out they actually heard from spies that the Nephite army that they had just left was going to be attacked and that they were all going to be killed. And upon hearing this, the Lamanites all got courage and escaped, even though thousands of them were killed. But that opened up that section of the Nephite army to return to the land of Cumeni and help out and save maybe thousands of Nephite lives. And so in verse 35, they are praising God for delivering them. They are rejoicing that things worked out the way that they did, even though they were forced to kill thousands of Lamanites when they didn't want to have to, and a large amount of Lamanite prisoners actually got away. And so it's not a complete win, but what the people are really focused on is their safety and defense. And so even though, oh man, they lost their prisoners, they didn't really care about that bargaining chip, right? They aren't trying to get a strategic leg up over the Lamanites. They are, but that's not their primary objective. Their primary objective is to live. Their primary objective is to protect the women and the children and the families and their homes that are in all the Nephite cities. That is their goal. And that is shown to me by the fact that even though they lost an innumerable amount of Lamanite prisoners that they could have used for labor or whatever, they don't care about that. They care that they were delivered from the armies of the Lamanites. And again, that reminds me of their priorities, which I think is a very important reminder. In all the war chapters, there's all this war, there's all this fighting, there's all these strategies that are happening, but really it's all just to protect families. It's all to protect the religion of God, right? That's all that the Nephites want to do. So the standout verse is verse 27, which says, Now this was the faith of these of whom I have spoken. They are young, and their minds are firm, and they do put their trust in God continually. So I want to focus on that last word, that last phrase more specifically, and they did put their trust in God continually. Continually does not imply, well, they trusted him once, but not all the time, just kind of like they do it every once in a while. But continually implies constantly, right? They're always putting their trust in God. And that is the way that they live and breathe. They just trust God for their very life, which they're definitely doing because they're going to war. Again, these stripling warriors didn't have to go to war. They volunteered to help out the Nephites. And they're here because they trust God. Not only are they fighting because they trust God, but they're there at all because they're putting their trust in God continually and because of the way that they're taught by their mothers. And so that's a good reminder to us that when we trust God, we don't just do it once. We don't just say, okay, God, I'll take your word for it on this one. You say, okay, God, my life is yours. My life is in your hands. That's a lot more complete than a lot of us can manage. I definitely don't do that. But these stripling warriors are kind of the ideal in this respect, right? They're always trusting God. They're always saying, we have faith. And they're sure about their faith. They're confident in their faith. And because of that, they can use it to face things that should probably terrify them. But they know that is the right thing to do, and if they do the right thing with faith in God, they will be delivered. Whatever that looks like for them, whether it be death or life, they will be delivered. Anyways, I just love it, and I love the small detail where it just says they trust God continually, because that's a very important aspect of it. It's very easy to trust God on one decision, right? You pray about one thing, you say, okay, God, I think you're actually kind of right, let's do that. But that's not really trusting God. That's not giving your life over to God. Trusting him continually and completely involves giving every decision to him. even the ones that you're sure you have right. Anyways, it's a very scary thing to do that for God, when, for many, including me sometimes, he feels a little bit abstract. He feels a little bit apart from us. And I know he isn't, and I often have spiritual experiences that remind me he isn't, but it is not rare when I feel myself hesitating to trust God because, I don't know, it's hard. The people around me are a lot more immediate, and they might even be telling me something different. So anyways, a good reminder that trusting God is never the wrong choice, even though it might feel like it, because we have a different perspective from him. Anyways, that was the episode for today. I hope you enjoyed. I loved this chapter. It was so cool. It just had everything that I like about the war chapters. It didn't have quite as much high drama as that one chapter that Tiankum killed Amalickiah or stuff like that, but still a very cool chapter. And again, it kind of dips its toes into a little bit of everything. So good times had by all. So there's just a few links down in the show notes. The first one is a let me know what you learned link. So if you want to shoot me a message and chat about something Book of Mormon related, you can do that. Or you can DM me on Instagram. Next, we have some links to access a digital copy of the Book of Mormon. So if you don't have your own copy and you want to read along or find a chapter you like or create a study plan, you can go ahead and click those down below. Next, there's a quick support the show link. So if you really like what I do, that is the way to support it. You can go ahead and click there. And yeah, whatever you send is greatly appreciated. Next, we are on YouTube, so if you aren't already watching on YouTube, you can go ahead and find the podcast on that platform. You can also subscribe because I put YouTube Shorts up there. It's a good time. And finally, we are on Instagram, so if you want to follow me where I'm the most active, where I post my reels first usually, you can go ahead and follow me there. You can also get some story trivia and updates, etc., etc. And all in all, yeah, it's a good time. So I'll see you there. That's all I've got for you today. I'll talk to you later. Bye.